Congratulations, Mrs. Paxton. Please welcome to the stage Lieutenant Colonel Deborah Moule, registered nurse, U.S. Air Force retired, and Colonel Rocco Armanda, MD, United States Army retired, who will introduce you to the recipients of the 2015 Hero of Military Medicine Ambassador Award.
Congratulations, Mrs. Paxton. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's my honor to be here. In December 2005, I learned that come the new year, I would be deploying to Balad Airfield, Iraq. At this point in my military career, as a registered nurse, I had served at many overseas locations. And the upcoming deployment to Iraq, I thought, would be familiar duty. I couldn't have been more incorrect. On Sunday, January the 29th, 2006, I was on duty as the Surgical Services Section Chief, Intra-Theater Hospital at Balad Airfield, Iraq. The day started out like most others. The surgeons and staff had already cared for several surgical patients. Most of those patients had undergone follow-up procedures from injuries that they had previously sustained. It was early in the afternoon, and the department was relatively calm. Nurses were busy restocking the 3 operating rooms. Surgical technicians were wrapping and sterilizing instruments, and I remember hearing their chatter and their laughter as they worked. Suddenly, our peace was ended, and there was the too frequent blast from the overhead hospital speakers. Trauma call, ER. Incoming wounded, ETA 15 minutes. Lab, radiology, pharmacy, anesthesia, and surgery respond. Trauma call, ER. I immediately sprinted the 100 steps from our OR to the ER. And on my way, the speakers brought more information about the incoming wounded. 2 very seriously injured, 1 head injury. I quickly turned around, ran back to the OR. The staff was eager to hear information about the incoming patients. We've got a head coming in. Get a cranie set up fast. Next, womp womp, if you will, of the rotor blades from the Black Hawk helicopter. The sound was getting louder and closer. Our patients were already here. Forget the 15 minutes, they're here, I yelled to my staff, and back to the ER I ran. In my memory, I can still see those double wooden doors which allowed entrance to our tent hospital at Balad. Then, in an instant, those ER doors burst open, and coming through on a green canvas litter was our head patient. 2 burly medics carried the litter, one of them shouting the patient's vital signs and injuries as he knew them. Many of us were trying to get a name or a number, anything to ID this patient. And then someone in the ER said, "It's Bob Woodward." As I looked into the face of the man who would soon be my patient in surgery, I remember saying to no one in particular, "That's not Bob Woodward, that's Bob Woodruff." Within moments, Bob's litter was transported with great urgency, the 100 steps straight for the operating room. In OR number 1, Balad Hospital's largest, Bob's surgical team was ready for him. 2 neurosurgeons, 2 anesthesiologists, 3 scrub technicians, and me, his circulating nurse. Bob's surgical team quickly positioned and secured him to the OR table. Once I knew he was correctly and safely positioned, I focused on shaving and cleansing Bob's surgical sites. the OR was buzzing with numerous conversations. Anesthesiologists to laboratory personnel, surgeons vocalized operative sequence to the OR techs, and the technicians checked and rechecked their instrumentation with each other. Besides the voices of the people speaking, the patient monitoring equipment competed for attention and could be heard beeping and alarming in the background. Balad's OR number 1 was an extremely noisy room. As I continued to prep my critically injured patient, I realized I was the only person in that OR who wasn't talking. But I felt I needed to let Bob know that he wasn't alone. So I leaned down to Bob's right ear and I said, "Bob, this is Deb. I'm your nurse, and we're all here for you, but I need you to stay with us. We're going to take very good care of you, but you must hang in there." Well, Bob, you definitely hung in there, and with my whole heart, I thank you for doing so. However, what's more important than how I feel is how you and your amazing Lee, through the Bob Woodruff Foundation, have made over 2 million service members, veterans, and their caregivers feel. And that is not forgotten. Thank you. Please now welcome Dr. Rocco Armanda, who would like to say a few words about Bob and Lee Woodruff. Thank you.
Bob and Lee are an amazing couple. They redefine what service is all about. I had the honor to take care of Bob along with the rest of the team at Bethesda Naval Hospital, then becoming Bethesda Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. And it was the effort of the entire team that made the difference. He had benefited from an incredibly steep learning curve, a learning curve that had occurred throughout hundreds of soldiers who had undergone decompressive craniectomies. But he didn't stop at his recovery, and neither did Lee. That was just the beginning. It was the beginning of a whole new mode of service, of basically using their position, using their talents to basically mobilize amazing resources from the civilian sector, military sector, and government to close a bridge, to close a gap. And that was something that truly showed me what was possible, not just in terms of recovery, but in terms of what we can do as a nation. We're a nation at war. We're not just a military at war. And that's what Bob and Lee have proved to us. Their service demonstrates that we are one as a nation as we are one in service. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the recipients of the 2015 Hero of Military Medicine Ambassador Award, Bob and Lee Woodruff.
First of all, Rocco, thank you so much for a wonderful introduction, but I have to tell you all that Lee and I, we had to go sit in the other room and watch all this on the screen. I had no idea until about 3 hours ago that Deb Mule was going to even be here, and I never in a million years thought that she would come up here and tell that story. So like a little baby girl, a couple minutes ago, I couldn't stop crying. And I've loved her for so long. And I'll tell you one thing is I'll never forget the story then, that when I was in that place in Balad at that time, of course I don't remember any of it. I've got every excuse to not know it since I was out for 5 weeks in a coma. But at that moment I remember Lee asked her later on, was it a shattered skull? And she said there were bones the size of her baby fingernail tiny little pieces of skull. And I could never forget that image. Since that time, I think we've had this unique relationship that we've been able to stay in touch. Rocco and Deb and I and Lee have been in contact ever since, ever since. And I think one of the sad things about the world of medicine, in the military, is there a good thing and a bad thing. The good thing is that we have learned more about medicine because of these wars than we ever would have thought in a million years. I tell people that I think it's sometimes more dangerous in New York City than it is on the sands of Iraq, because if you do get what we got, which is an IED explosion that crushed the left part of our heads and knocked us out and cost us things for the rest of our life, if we had gotten the same thing in New York, I'm not sure we'd be alive right now. I think we had doctors like Rocco and Deb and so many others doing this day after day, hour after hour. They knew exactly what happened to me. They knew exactly what to do, and they knew there was no malpractice fear that had to have it all. I used to be a lawyer, by the way, so just chilling. But not that. But the downside is that I think all of these amazing people that are saving lives like that and making us cry when we watch you tell the story, is that I think almost everyone I've spoken to, whether it's at Bethesda Naval where I was, or friends that I've gotten at Walter Reed, or maybe at the ones that were just over there in Balad, I'll never forget. Even the only time I've gone back to Iraq or Afghanistan was one time when Admiral Mullen went, and I knew the security was pretty good, and so I went back to Kandahar to the medical center there, and I ran against two people. One of them was one that stabilized me up in Longstool, and the other one was a nurse that was in Bethesda Naval in my room for 35 straight days while I was out. And they said, "Do you recognize us?" And I said, "No, I don't remember you at all." But I have ever since. But the thing is that none of the caregivers, none of you doctors and nurses and medics, et cetera, who save people's lives get a chance to see us again after we recover. You know, it's a weird thing. But you had the chance, like we're seeing here tonight, because of this. And I've had that unique situation where we did start a foundation, and I've been in contact with them. And of course, I've done a million stories as a journalist about exactly what's being accomplished. And so I've had the honor to stay in touch with those that save lives like this. And this is exactly what I'm talking about. And they can see that there's hope. And we can see that the medicine is magical. And it's because of everybody here in this room. So I can't thank you enough. And I'm going to have to pass that on to the other one who needs almost all of the credit, is Lee.
So that, ladies and gentlemen, is your miracle. That's what you all did. That's military medicine in action. That's not stopping, not thinking, putting someone else's life above your own. And as someone so eloquently said earlier, behind every one of those guys, and by the way, where is Deb? Because you ruined my mascara back there. I have had the chance to meet so many of the continuum of Bob's care along the way and hear their amazing stories, but I have never heard that story. It was really hard and beautiful and wonderful to hear. But to me, when I go around the country and sort of act as that bridge between the civilian world and the military world, I tell those stories so often because they, to me, are the example of the 1% or less than 1% of us that raise their hands to serve. And those of you in uniform out there tonight, and those of you not in uniform who are retired, that means you. That's an extraordinary thing that you would go somewhere into an area of conflict to leave your children, to leave your spouses, and to say that the duty and the honor of my country right now is the most important thing. And you do that for us so that when I got that phone call on January 29th, when Deb was already working on his skull, and I was literally sitting in Disney World with our 4 children thinking that I was going to go to Epcot Center that day, looking at that line between the before and after that so many of you know who work in military medicine. I had no idea what was on the other side of the world. The most incredible team ever, who was willing to put everything down, to do everything they could to save my husband's life. And as Deb said, to bring him back to his 4 children, to be a father and a husband, and ultimately to return as a journalist, which is the work that he loves and the work that he believes in. Because if you ask my husband if he believes that there should be people there today as journalists who are embedded, he would tell you that as long as there are Americans who are willing to put their lives on the line for us, there need to be people there to tell their story. And that's the important thing about America. So I want to end on something that I feel really passionately about, and it was something I learned in the hospital in Bethesda and went on to see in action. And I saw it in Rocco, I saw it in Deb, I saw it in so many of the young men and women who came in to care for Bob day in and day out. And that was the ability to leave the door open for hope. And if there's one thing that I saw in military medicine, and as we went on to private rehabilitation back in New York where we live, it wasn't as alive there as it was in the private sector, as it was in the hospital here in Washington. And that was the ability to allow the family member to hope in whatever form that was, whether it was faith or a miracle or blind darn hope, or sometimes having nothing else at your disposal but walking in that ICU and believing that your husband would get better. Those doctors and nurses told me stories every single day in the absence of being able to give me a percentage or tell me if my husband would wake up and understand that he had 2 little twins or 2 older kids, or that we were married, or that he loved me. And I turned to Rocco when I was finally ready to hear what a TBI was all about, when I was on day 36 and he wasn't waking up and it wasn't looking good. And I said, Rocco, I don't care about all that anchor stuff and if he's going to go back to work or any of that. I want to know if he will still love me. And Rocco turned to me and he said something which must have bubbled up in him. He said, I have never seen anybody yet who hasn't woken up and loved the people that they loved before. And Rocco and everybody out there who works in this field, thank you for allowing the families to hope. Because without hope, there's no life. And without life, there's no love. And you brought Bob back to me. And that allowed us to go on and take the bad thing that happened to us and turn it around on all of the other families I saw in the hospital who were struggling to survive. And I'm honored for the work that we do and that all of you do. And I'm honored to be an American. So thank you for this honor tonight.
Well, I don't know if anyone needs a Kleenex, but I do. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now break for dinner. When we return, we will honor more extraordinary individuals. Please enjoy your meals.